Please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please take your seats. Our program will begin now.
Good morning. It's so good to see all of you here in the room in Toronto. Welcome everyone who's joining us virtually. We're excited to have you here as well. My name is Lauren Keel. I'm from Bloomberg Media. I'm very excited to be with you today to be hosting this event on intelligent automation and creating the workforce of the future. We're going to have a great day here and some fantastic conversations for you. So I want to just start by setting the stage a little bit about what we're going to be talking about. Technology has already made massive changes to the way that the workforce has been working over the past couple of years. And then you layered onto that a pandemic that changed everything for so many of us. We all know somebody who moved to another city, who started working remotely. Maybe that was you. Maybe this is a new city for you. Maybe something has radically changed in the way that you work. We've seen everything from mass relocations to mass resignations to massive changes in the way that we are all doing our jobs and working with other people each day. So today we're going to talk about all of that, how the future of work has changed dramatically and what things look like as we go on from here. We're going to talk about how things like intelligent automation are changing the way that we're able to improve processes, that we're able to interact with each other, we're able to use data in better ways. So a lot of great things that we're going to be talking about. How do we deal with labor shortages, improve efficiencies? So we have some amazing speakers for you today who are going to talk all about that. Before we do that, I want to just go through a couple of quick housekeeping things so you guys have the best day with us possible. For everybody who's watching online, if you have any issues at any point, just try to refresh and see if that works, if that fixes any audio or video issues. If it doesn't, then there is a box on the bottom right corner that you can write us a note in. We'll be able to help you with any tech issues that you're having there. We've also partnered with an organization called FISN. They're an audio-to-text platform. They're going to be transcribing this discussion in real time. So if you'd like to see that, if you'd like to see the transcript, there is a way for you to click a link in the session description. So please do that if you want to check it out. We would love to hear from all of you in the program, everybody here in the room, and everybody who's watching as well. If you want to submit questions, we would love to get your questions for the speakers, especially for our panels today. There are QR codes on the screens around me. If you want to scan those, that's how you're going to be able to submit your questions. You also probably got a card. Some of you got a card as you came in. There's a QR code on that as well, so use that. We want to get your questions, so please do that. Please scan away. Pick up the phones. I won't be offended. And then anybody who's online, you can also do the same thing. There's a white tab on the right side of the video where you'll be able to input your questions. So please send us your questions as well. We would also love to engage with you on social media. So please use the hashtag #IntelligentAutomation to send us all of your tweets, Instagrams, whatever you would like. And then I want to really thank and acknowledge our sponsor, IBM, for hosting today's conversation and just making these conversations possible. So to kick off our conversation for the day, I'd like to welcome to the stage Ed Lynch. Ed is Vice President of Strategy for IBM Automation. He's going to give us some welcome remarks. Ed, stage is yours.
Thank you, Lauren. Good morning, everyone. This is like fabulous to see people in person for the first time. Like for me, this is the first time speaking in an audience since, I don't know, March 12th, 2020. I don't know about you guys. This is, other than weddings and funerals, this is the first time that I've put on black shoes. So fabulous. A few extra OZs around the belt from the last time I spoke here, but quick intro. Who am I? What do I do? As Lauren said, my name is Ed Lynch. I am the vice president in the product management organization, IBM Automation Software. I manage a portfolio of investments that are all focused on one really simple thing, and that is to give you operating leverage, ability to scale your business without scaling your workforce. Think about that. Scale your business without scaling your workforce. And that's what this intelligent automation thing is really all about. So automation has been around forever, like since the beginning of recorded time. Think about the wheel. What was the wheel all about? The wheel was all about allowing humans to move big, heavy things without putting them on their backs. Labor offset. Think about the aqueducts. Aqueducts brought water from the mountains into the cities. Why did we do that? The Romans did that because they didn't want to have the people go fetch the water and bring it back to the city. Think about the printing press. Printing press, what was that all about? That was all about the dissemination of information in very wide form so that Gutenberg could spread the good word, but spread the good word far and wide. Think about the combine harvester, more recent, mid-1800s. What was that about? Moore put it in place so that he could clear a field in minutes that would take his family a month. Think about that. Labor offset. That's what this is all about. More recently, early 1900s. Early 1900s, Ford invented the assembly line. What was the assembly line all about? The assembly line was all about bringing the car to the people so that they could build the car, as opposed to bringing the people to the car, which is the way that cars were manufactured before. So all of these things have to do with labor offset, making machines or whatever the invention is, do the work of individuals. So pressure today on business is incredible to do automation. Why is it incredible? Well, we've got this inflation thing happening, we've got this recession thing happening, but there are three fundamental drivers that are really putting the pressure on business to drive automation and put more automation into their businesses. Number one, the great digital shift. Lauren talked about COVID. COVID was let's say, turned the trickle into a torrent. The trickle was people were digitizing already. We were digitizing these things and those things. We were digitizing invoice processing, things like that. But the torrent came when nobody could work in the office anymore. Fred and Joe and Mary used to sit in cubes next to each other. When they had to work at home, the only way they could communicate was digitally. They had these Zoom calls. I have Zoom calls like every day now. I go to the basement and I sit on Zoom for like 8 hours a day. But before, You used to pass a piece of paper back and forth between Fred and Joe and Mary in different cubicles. You couldn't do that anymore. Anybody who relied on Fred and Joe and Mary sitting in cubes next to each other were done. They were cooked. There's a big bank in the US who I dealt with in April of 2020 that relied on manual check processing. Think about this for a second. Manual check processing. They had these armored trucks that went around from bank branch to bank branch in a city, gathered together all the checks. They brought the checks into a central clearinghouse, and then they processed the checks. Well, what do you think happened to them when COVID broke? That whole process busted. It busted because people couldn't talk to people. We couldn't get together. We couldn't be seen in the same building anymore. So, great digital shift. Number one, pressure. Number two, pressure, IT complexity. I read a study a couple of weeks ago about, it was from IDC, and the study talked about the number of applications that are going to be built in the next 3 years. That number is staggering. 500 million new applications in the next 3 years. Now, even if it's off by an order of magnitude, who cares? 50 million. Think about the poor IT guy who's trying to manage that many applications. Companies are more and more these days defined by the applications that they use to run their companies. Think about Netflix, think about Amazon, right? All of these things are applications. Applications are expressions of automation. So, the poor IT guy, you're thinking about, well, is this thing containerized, not containerized? Is it run by microservices? Is it sitting on an IaaS? Is it sitting on bare metal? Where's the storage? What's the network? Where are the routers? All of that complexity, an IT manager used to be able to keep in their head. No way, can't do that anymore. That complexity is so out of control that you need something, some kind of machine to take advantage of that, take care of that. Third big pressure, skills. You can call it the Great Resignation, you can call it quiet quitting, you can call it the boomers just retiring because they're just moving on, but the threat to institutional knowledge is massive. And if we can't codify, put into machines what we do when all those people quit or move on, good luck. The race for talent is going crazy. If you can find the talent costs you a fortune. So pressure on skills, really big, big thing. So digital shift, IT complexity, skills. All of those things push for automation. You need to have automation. Okay, so what's IBM doing to help here? IBM is investing, we're investing in tools and technologies to help give you operating leverage, to help you scale your business without scaling your workforce. That's the essence of automation. 3 vectors of what I think about when I allocate investment. Number 1 is about people productivity. The people you have, you want to make them more productive. You want to allow them to produce more widgets in a given period of time. Okay, what do you do about that? Well, help them create applications, low code, no code things, authoring tools to build automations so that they can get things done quickly. AI algorithms to have learning so that the machine can learn what people do. Watch Mary. She is the best at this topic. Watch what she does. Look at the input, look at the action, look at the output. Learn that. Other things like digital workers. Digital workers allow you to scale your business without scaling your workforce. Digital worker, think about an entity that sits at the other end of Slack or the other end of Teams. You have no idea whether the thing at the other end of the line is a real person. It's like that ultimate Turing test. Digital workers, I think, are going to be the ultimate scaling of the workforce without scaling the people. So that's the first angle. Second angle is about business productivity. Business productivity is all about digitizing the workflow. It's about digitizing the decision. It's about digitizing the piece of paper so that you can drive a workflow from a piece of paper or a virtual document or whatever it is you need to drive the workflow with. That set of technologies, big core of what we do, that set of technologies will allow you to, again, make your business more productive. Third is IT automation. IT automation, this is the ability to scan for anomalies and react in real time so that you can do things preemptively before the machine actually goes and crashes. It allows you to watch carbon footprint, electricity consumption, so that you can do sustainability, whatever your sustainability goals are. So all three of those things, that's what we do. That's what we're in business to do. All of these conversations, I think, are going to happen in the breakouts. So again, welcome. Thank you for coming. One last thing before I step off the stage. Bear with me for a little thought experiment. So imagine if you could save 1 hour of your time every day for a year. 1 hour a day. So most people work for 200 days, maybe a few more, 200 hours, 5 weeks. What would you do with that time? I bet you won't do dumb things like read reports or go into Excel spreadsheets and dink around with macros. You won't do that kind of stuff. What you'll do is you'll dream, you'll think. You will conspire to go attack your enemies. Those are the things that humans are really good at. So as you go through this day, think about that. What am I going to do to offset 1 hour of my time in a given day? If you can do that through automation, you actually turn on a whole wealth of knowledge and experience. So thanks for coming. Thanks for being here in person. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks for giving us all of those great things to think about as we go into today. So we're going to jump right into our first conversation. We're going to talk about how advancements in automation and AI are changing the seamless workflows between different job functions, different lines of business, exactly what Ed was telling us about. We're going to be joined by 3 executives from different industries who are going to talk about how they're using AI and automation to transform their operations, break down silos, become more efficient. So I'd like to turn the stage over to my colleague, Brody Ford from Bloomberg Technology. He's a reporter for Bloomberg Technology. He's going to be in conversation with Hani Abbasi, the Vice President of Global Technology and Transformation and Integration for TransUnion, Christine Gonzalez-Wirtz. Christine is the Senior Researcher and Advisor for DXC Leading Edge, and Johan Henning, Senior Vice President, Finance and Infrastructure for Brookfield Asset Management. Brody and everyone, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Brody Ford. I write about software companies for Bloomberg, about cloud, automation, digital transformation, and I hear a lot of sales pitches from these companies about what they're doing, how they're helping, and so I love to come to these kind of events and hear from you all about how you're using it and how's everything going. So maybe to start off with, one thing I think that's really fun is just to kind of walk us through one example of how you are automating, one thing that you found to be really useful that you'd like to share. And also, when you do, maybe just give a nice introduction to everybody. And Christine, you want to kick it off?
Sure. I'm Christine Gonzalez-Wirtz. I am a researcher by trade. I work on things like sustainability, human technology integration, and business storytelling. So I have a wonderful, fun remit. One of the things that I think is interesting and we found in our research is, to Ed's point, 96% of people who take virtual agent technology into their contact centers are actually seeing benefit. So there's a reason that number is so high, Ed. Simply put, when you start to look at those kinds of things, the business case for doing so pays off not only rapidly, but it pays off extensively, and it pays off extensively because it allows you to learn enough to go to other parts of your organization and to be able to see that. Because if in fact you find you have a problem in some area and there's a quality problem, you're able to give that feedback back. And the faster that feedback gets to where it needs to, the bigger the benefit to your organization in your ability to respond.
you, Christine. So my name is Hani Abbasi. I lead technology transformation and integration for TransUnion. I spent most of my career in technology consulting, investment banking, and transformation. At present, most of what we do, all the transformation elements here at TransUnion are technology-driven. Like, we are a technology-driven company, so we're moving to the cloud, we're doing automation and all of that stuff, right? One of my primary responsibilities is to look after the investment prioritization of these transformations. So what is the return on investment, and so on, as well as really look at if there is a cost efficiency component to it. To add your point around digital transformation is targeted at workforce efficiencies, but also other efficiencies that are non-people related. So how do you quantify that? How do you translate that into tangible wins for the company? So I'm looking forward to the conversations today. Thank you for having me here.
Of course. Johan? Thanks, Brady. So I'm Johan Henning from Brookfield. And at Brookfield, our biggest strength and our greatest challenge is just the size and scope of it. So we have $750 billion of assets under management, where we've bought various companies and assets. And in terms of the investment team, it's 1,000 people. But if you count all the people in the operating companies, it's 180,000 people. And we have to coordinate all of that data. Now, my specific role is in finance. I oversee the private funds in the infrastructure space that will buy portfolio companies. And we have similar functions in real estate and private equity. And our challenge is to assimilate all of this data in an efficient manner to do our reporting to our investors. So we've done a few projects over the last few years that dovetailed into each other. So the first one is we used a financial reporting consolidation system. So before, our data was with various service providers in a good quality and good systems. But the last step, the financial reporting, was a bit embarrassing, where it was still Excel and Word. We moved that onto a cloud-based system. Every service provider does it in, and it just had so many advantages. The review process is really good because everyone can leave their comments in there. There's a good audit trail. You don't waste time on formatting, because we want people to have a one Brookfield experience wherever they come in. But then if you have literally people wasting time setting column widths in one fund to be the same as column widths in the other fund, it's just not a good use of time. So you have one template, and then everyone uses that. It does the footing. And we started it with financial statements, and now we're using it for things like internal regional results presentations. Then the other challenge that we had is we have asset management teams that run or work with the portfolio companies, and then our FinOps team. And there's just so much data to move between them. So the normal things everyone struggles with: version control, integrity of data. So we use a data analytics tool now where there's one source of the truth. There's no version control issues, and it's become incredibly efficient. And then lastly, we started using bots. So we have to issue certain notices to investors. Like, if we call capital, I'll never send an email, you have to pay $50 million by next Tuesday. So we have a secure and if anyone did that, their treasury team would need a talking to. But so we have notices that go in a portal that they download. And we have to check that, because there can't be anything wrong with that. The same with their partners' capital statements. So we used to have to do a sample test, and it's very mind-numbing work for someone to do. But now that we use a bot, we can do a 100% scope test and go through it. So all of these things really add up, where it reduces the man hours to do it, but more importantly, it really reduces the grind time. So people aren't wasting time on tables and graphs. They can focus on the analysis and the commentary, which is a much better use of their time. And to Ed's earlier point, it's about scaling your business. So we don't want to add X people every time we add Y assets. And this enables us to have a scalable platform. And then a few takeaways from everyone: make sure that what you're doing is scalable. And also what we did, we never went big bang with any of the projects. We made sure we bit off what we could choose. So take a project, roll it out for one aspect, get that working, and you can see what other use cases you have.
That That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think that idea of saving us all from the administrative tasks, I think we can all agree that's kind of what burns you out. You know, it's all these dumb little compliance things, not having to do that. I mean, there's plenty I would like not to have to do. And
I have an example from my team as
Go
well,
ahead.
actually. Yeah, so one of the teams I manage does global infrastructure health dashboards. So we are in 35 markets. We have a lot of hardware and software, right? So this team is responsible for reporting out which servers and storage are on what level of utilization, if we need more of those. Where are we running out on vendor warranties, right? Where is the useful life coming to an end? And then corrective action needs to be taken, right? Earlier, that process took about 2 weeks, engaging 2 to 3 resources, liaising with different markets, validating information, and so on. We did an automation project to link about 7 or 8 data sources. We brought the time down from 2 weeks to less than an hour. And now we're in phase 2 of that project where we are posting these dashboards online. So it's becoming more of a self-help, and that's where some process efficiencies are coming in. So we no longer need to do calls all year round and follow up on next steps. Each team that utilizes those insights is responsible to drive their own next steps.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and you know, I think we all can recognize that whether we're experiencing the start of a recession or just the fear of a recession, budgets are tighter, CIOs are a little more afraid to invest. And Christine, I know you have some thoughts and you've done some research on this idea of when times are tough economically, what role does automation play? Is it harder? Is it cost saving? What's your take on how we should think about this?
Well, there's a couple of things. First things first, you're going to have to spend your precious intellectual capital, your personal brand, on things. So you're going to have to figure out what those are and make them, because you're not going to have multiple projects to choose from. You're likely to have to choose very well. And you're going to have smaller starting points. So Hani brought it up, but this issue of how you do rapid cycle testing and how you're understanding and testing for different metrics and what are the new metrics for what you're trying to do. So in Hani's case, the challenge is not how much uptime is on there. The challenge is, do you know how many labor hours you spent doing it before to understand how to calculate your savings? That's not something the process has necessarily accorded us for. So if you're simply making things faster, you are reaching, if you're simply speeding things up, you can reach mediocrity faster. You don't want to do that. The other side of it is how you are able to look at the principles of Agile. And Agile is something that we've talked about on DevOps for a very long time. But Agile is something, as it now moves into the business, means that you have smaller pieces you work on, and you're able to reevaluate yourself once you've gone through that process. So you're able to start you're able to start small, and then look at how you redirect as you go, instead of just building one big end-to-end monolith up front, because you're not going to get the money for it. So understand how you start small and get management buy-in for how you will be able to scale.
Awesome, thank you so much. And yeah, and Hani, what are your thoughts about what forms of automation are kind of always going to be good in a time where budgets are tighter?
I would say start with the broad statement, right? I think any big transformation effort needs a return on investment, right? Ultimately, we do transformation for our customers, and in our case for TransUnion, we also do it to improve the lives of consumers, right? But ultimately, if you're talking about a budget of hundreds of millions of dollars or sometimes north of $1 billion for a digital transformation, it needs to have value creation for investors. If you can, to Christine's point, track or measure the impact, and you can communicate that and report that to investors, I don't think there is huge constraints on any economic environment when it comes to carrying out those projects. Like at present, we are continuing at full force our digital transformation efforts, including our cloud transformation program. If you look at other adjacent industries where some companies are going through major change, the projects are not stopping because they have a good value argument, either through revenue upside or cost reductions.
Awesome. And Johan, as an asset manager, I know very acutely aware of the economic environment. So what do you think? Is it harder to get sign-off on automation projects in this kind of environment?
I agree with you. CIOs will be a bit more reluctant to sign, but in this time where there might be some economic pressure, if you can add value, it's important. So I think the key here is there must be well-run projects and actually deliver tangible value. Companies where it's lavish and extravagant and not well managed and there's a big spend and it doesn't deliver the result, they're going to hurt.
Yeah.
And like we make sure that we won't be one of them. But it's going to happen.
None of us will be one of
Yeah.
them. And Christine, what do you think about, you mentioned this idea of how crucial it is to get that internal buy-in. How do you do that? How do you make sure from the get-go that you have that?
I think that there are a number of ways to start. And the first is, everybody wants to jump to the end state. And I think that understanding you've got probably 3 hops to get there. And 3 hops is a good way of thinking about it because, I think it was Drucker who said that a pilot is what teaches us everything we didn't know about the project going in, which is absolutely true. So your first set is to be able to understand and really articulate your problem well, then to be able to look at how you're going to bring people along and how you're going to create a benefits case that makes a whole lot more sense. Because that benefits case is going to be built on different things. Okay? So now that you're starting to look at making that investment, how can you break it up into pieces and paint benefits that are more than just financial? Very frequently, as the CEO of Patagonia taught us last week taught us that the planet is not just a stakeholder. The planet can be actually the stakeholder. So how do we paint the sustainability benefits? How do we paint the benefits for the people? And how do we paint, as Ed said, if we've got that much time, what are you going to do with it? How do we paint the benefits to our customers and not losing track of any of that as part of the process?
Awesome. Yeah, and I would like to add with that, it's really important to get management buy-in in the beginning and for everything you're considering with the project, and making them aware we're not going to get to the end state immediately, but showing them what the results will be in the first step. And also in terms of staffing, like what I found to be a great factor in success is you must have someone who's close to the business involved in the project. If you bring on the best team of third-party experts, they'll deliver something that works, but it's not what the business actually needed. So what I found works best is you actually have to identify the people and separate from their business, take away their day-to-day tasks, let them focus on the project with the consultant team, and backfill them for as long as it takes, whether that's temporary or even permanent. So I think it's helpful to get management to buy in the beginning. This is the way we're going to approach it. This will be most efficient. And then you have their support to make their staffing changes.
I would just add that the great points that Christine and Johan made. Once that's done, though, it's very important to get adoption and engagement from the broader workforce, right? Because without that, digital transformation can be a total failure, right? And how do you, in my experience, the best ways around that has been to start with the benefits case, what Christine mentioned, right? Publish playbooks as much as possible of like how things would be done in light of any tools that you're using, right? Then upskilling programs. Now, depending on how technical your transformation is, say you're going to the cloud, then you may need certifications. And we did about 2,000 cloud certifications between 2020 and 2021 in TransUnion in our technology team, right? That's required to upskill folks, right? And then last but not the least, process engineering, right? If your processes are not tight enough to make your workforce sync with the technology to drive accountability, you have not really achieved the most optimal result.
Somebody goes add something.
Yeah, the one piece that I think is also true there is how do we not just build for that end state, but there's generally a different set of resources. And this is kind of weird in the sense of you do that initial build out, and that's the discovery phase. But as you go into the development phase where you want to scale it, you generally need to rely on a different group of resources. So as part of our research, we looked at these number of states of the way you do this. The discovery resources, the people who build out and create that scale up front, are not sometimes the people who are the next phase, the actual growers of the technology. Builders and growers can be different people. So as you start to consider that rollout and that culture piece, make sure you're choosing well, because the developers like very much to get into, as opposed to necessarily the thought of expanding and bringing on adoption.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And we've talked a lot about this idea of internal buy-in, making sure employees, execs are all on board. We have a great question from the audience, this idea that we can measure if something saves us costs, quickens processes. How do we measure whether or not it's actually good for the customers? Maybe Johan, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. So in our business, our view is we have two types of customers. We have the people who invest in our funds, whose money we manage, and then we have the customers of the portfolio companies that we run. And in terms of the investors who invest into us, we have an investor relations team, and we don't have millions of customers there. It's like we can measure in the thousands, so it's easier to monitor, and we get very direct feedback from them if they're not happy. So a few years ago, we rolled out this investor portal across all our funds, all our business units, where I mentioned we put the capital call notice, the distributions, and it's been really seamless, and we've seen like very tangible happiness results from them. Because apart from just accessing the safe data, it has a lot of live reporting that's specific for their holdings, which is really value add. And when they see that, they give us the feedback. And then each of our portfolio companies will have their own way of measuring the customer satisfaction. And sometimes it's through hard metrics like what is the retention? When the lease is over, do they renew it? And then often they'll have to do surveys to see, is this working for you and where can we improve?
Awesome. Hani, what do you
I would
think?
just add to that. I think you can measure. So for us, we're primarily a B2B company, right? I think it's possible to measure the customer experience return through the customer life cycle. So all the way from how well they are able to understand your products, to how they're able to connect, to customer service in general, and then any other upgrades and so on. So for example, if you do a digital transformation and you can bring down the time to connect your customer from a few months to a few days, right? Just that adoption on its own is a very well-known metric that we track, right? Second is like you can have more generic overarching KPIs like the NPS score, right? We track that on a very regular basis. We get direct feedback. We do surveys, as Johan was mentioning, for like more mid-market customers. And then there are other KPIs you can track, which is like how well or how successfully are customers upgrading on your products? How much more successfully are they exploring new products which they hadn't done so? So depending on where you are with the customer's life cycle, you can track certain matrices to see your success. Yeah.
Awesome. And Christine, I know that probably as all of us are customers in this room, supply chain issues have, really hurt a lot of us. And you've done some research on how, automation can improve the supply chain for customers, and I'm wondering if you could share.
Yeah, I think that first of all, supply chain is affecting everyone. There is not an industry out there that has not been troubled by supply chain and supply chain disruption. There is a statistic that says virtually 45% of the retailers in business who, without rapid and distinct remediation to their supply chains and the challenges they face, might go out of business. They are at risk for bankruptcy. It is, but this is not just limited to these kinds of pieces. We do this exercise. They're called Wardley maps. And what they do is they begin to map strategic forces, and we're in the process of doing this for, we have, I think, 60 maps that are in place that map by industry all of the strategic forces that come in and cause shifts around that, and the supply chain has risen to the top as the biggest issue. When we start to look at the supply chain as a means to do this, most of our supply chains were designed to look one up, one down. Okay? The challenge is we have no ability to remove that systemic risk that exists from the beginning of the supply chain, from concept to creation, and then through reclamation on the back half. So you've got to have that whole piece in mind now, and there are advantages to being able to build some of these capabilities. You're going to end up doing it with apps. You're layering over apps in general. But even things like the software bill of materials that came up. Just as an example, Tesla doesn't update all of their vehicles at the same time. So every Tesla has its own bill of materials. How you're going to track that, Ed brought up complexity. That is it. That you've got to understand the complexity at unit levels. You can only do that through automation. So as you're starting to consider the ways in which you will redesign your business, you will determine tasks that simply cannot be done by humans. You will determine tasks that you would dramatically prefer will be done by humans. But how you, to the gentleman's point, to Hani's and Johan's point, how you orchestrate the data and create longer lines of sight and notifications and means of letting you know how to handle that will be the only ways you're going to get through that, those kinds of upgrades.
Awesome. And so this is another one from the audience, and I'm going to open it to whichever one of you feels, compelled. So are we at a point yet where some of these traditional professional service jobs can be fully automated? Things like car salespeople, accountants, paralegals. Are we here? And if not, how far are we?
I think it depends on what part of that workforce we're talking about. So if you take, for example, let's say car salespeople, right? If you're talking about more manual elements of that role, which to Ed's point earlier, right? Like you can automate a lot of that, right? You can create workforce efficiencies, but then the question becomes if automation becomes a commodity and every car dealership can have access to it, what is your differentiated experience, right? And in order to drive that differentiation, you will need some level of personalized touch. You'll need some level of customization. So there are layers of that labor force where you can talk about automation, and then the others which will be your differentiator, right? And then the second question becomes, what do you do with that automation or that efficiency, right? It doesn't always go down to the P&L as a saving. You can grow. You can repurpose that workforce to future growth initiatives. You can repurpose them to new business lines that you want to drive. Just my 2 cents on this topic. Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of how far you think we are from a full automated workforce? Not full automated, but some of these roles can be fully automated.
Yeah, I think we're on the cusp, and what's going to happen is some of their tasks are definitely going to be automated, but I don't think it will yet replace like the full paralegal.
Yeah.
And also the tools they have, one paralegal might be able to handle the volume that 3 used to do.
Well, look at during the pandemic real estate,
Yeah.
closings, et cetera. So much of that, which was absolutely a face-to-face business, had to be done in person. You had to meet with the realtor 16 times. I bought a house last year.
Oh, man.
And so all of the pieces that needed to be done were moved online, not just rapidly, but it felt overnight, including all of the signatures and the management, the doc management. Now, how you're able to do that, you still need that realtor to kind of walk you through houses or have some guidance that actually knows you. Sure, you can go through and say, I like that kitchen. I would never exist in that kitchen, and that isn't a kitchen, it's a kitchenette. So being able to do that, and AI can learn those things and sort of bring you back pieces, but being able to assess the whole house and understand what a human is going to do in that instance, you're not going to do that. That's a fundamentally human task.
Awesome. Well, I think we're at about time, but thank you all so much. This was awesome. Can we get a round of applause for our panel here? Thank you. And now, I would like to welcome up Greg Pollack. He's an executive with IBM Automation, and he's going to be chatting with Lauren about cloud deployment.
Thank you, Brody. Good to see everybody again. Greg, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. It's really, really great to be here. As Ed said, it's nice to see all of these folks who are interested in automation in one room talking about a common goal. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
So you, in your role, you get a lot of times to work with people as they're really early on in their automation journey, as they're thinking about What are they going to adopt? How are they going to adopt? What that process looks like. So what are some of the big challenges you hear from people when you start to talk to them about this?
Yeah, I mean, really good insights from the panel just now. I think we see a lot of different things. Obviously, as Ed alluded to, automation has been at the forefront of what we do as companies and trying to innovate, and it's at the top of mind of the C-suite, whether it's to address sustainability or workforce management or IT complexity. It is imperative for us to be focused on automation. Now, I would say, one of the analysts that I follow, Horses for Sources, came out recently and said that 67% of executives, 2/3 of executives, say they're just beginning their automation journey, right? They're really just at the forefront. All of us in this room have accomplished so much, it feels like, but we're really just getting started. And we want to be able to find more value from the investments we're making in automation, right? So some of the big challenges that we have to address, number one is finding the right use cases. Right? A lot of times over the years, we've picked use cases that we're emotionally attached to, right? Like the RPA revolution is a great example of that, right? I hate to say it, it was kind of like the ShamWow of automation. It sucked all the air out of the room and became, like the Flex Seal. It's, let me fix this, let me fix that, let me fix this. And in reality, we need to be thinking bigger about how we address intelligent automation, how we apply AI-driven decisions, right? And how do we do that? We do that through understanding data. Right? We take a data-driven approach to how we approach automation. We can now use tools like process mining to really understand the complexities in our workflow and address things and actually achieve ROI, right? Christine alluded to it, is if we don't choose the right metrics of what we're tracking to and what ROI means to us, then we're not going to be able to address the problem head on and really fix things in a way that's meaningful and sustainable, and also taking more of an agile approach, right? And starting small, right? A lot of customers or companies that I've worked with make big investments up front, but really you need to find that pilot. You need to learn. You need to get, like DevOps taught us a lot of things. I think she mentioned that as well. BizOps is kind of this continuous workflow improvement that we need to do, continuous process improvement. It's constantly learning. So I think those are the challenges that I think we need to overcome, is choosing the right use cases, using data to inform decisions, and also going to more of a ROI-based approach and using data to inform the metrics we choose.
Is one of those data points cost savings? Is that what people?
Absolutely.
One of the things people are looking for? Like, how do you talk to a customer about that business value of this for them?
So the business value can come in a number of different ways, right? Like the lack of visibility into processes and the complexity of IT and the complexity of the organization and the applications that we've built over time. Cost savings is certainly the first thing that comes to the mind but we also, of the companies we talk to, but we also think about workforce efficiency, right? Ed talked about it, workforce productivity, right? We're facing the great resignation. We want to be able to use automation to enable our employees to spend more time with the customer. If you're in healthcare, we want our doctors and our patient providers to spend more time with their patients instead of behind a computer doing prescription refills and things like that. So it isn't always about the cost savings, it's about what is it accomplishing for my business, right? And you want to be able to enable your organization to be able to do so effectively.
Can you give us a couple examples? We got some good ones, I think, in the last panel. I'd love to hear maybe one or two from you.
Well, sure. I mean, some of the examples really come down to, what are the organizations that we work doing to address intelligent automation? The first thing that, you want to be able to choose the right tools, right? Understanding that you want to choose the right tools for your organization to be able to connect business and IT. Right? A lot of times we see silos within organizations. The line of business is focused on one thing and IT is focused on another thing. Being able to bring tools that can integrate the complexities of both sides of your business are really, really important. And in addition to that, we really want to focus on enabling our workforce to have more of an automation-centric mindset. Right? I think culture change is a really, really big part of how you enable automation. And as I get to some of these examples, really it came down to being able to enable their leadership to take an automation-centric approach. So one of the customers that we work with over in Europe, a large bank, credit to Emiliano, came to us and said, look, we really want to be able to serve our customers better, and we want to improve our front office and to be able to improve our processes. So we took we took them into a workshop, and we got to understand their business problem. The first thing, in order to figure out, you got to figure out what's the problem here. And in order to inform those decisions, what we did is we took a look at their data, right? We looked at their process data. We used a tool called process mining, and really understood the holistic end-to-end view of not only their front office, but their back office processes to give them a starting point, right? A place, a digital twin of their organization to really start to find opportunities and areas for automation. And once we did that, they started to say, okay, now that I've got a view of all these different things within my organization, now how can I enable automation, right? What tools can I use back to choosing the right tools? We allowed them to take a process automation tool and start automating processes all the way through that workflow. In addition, they also used automated decision making, right? So Ed alluded to this in his opening remarks, which is enabling AI to make decisions. We need to train the machines to think like us, to be able not to replace us, to Johan's earlier point, but to be able to augment the things that we do. And if these decisions keep happening over and over again, every time, we need to be able to automate those things so that we can spend more time focused on the customer, right? So they automated, I think, 91 processes. They've got another 100 in the pipeline that they've identified. And according to what they've shared with us, they've saved nearly $2 million in cost savings back to that point. But really, the benefit to them was really this expansive operational efficiency that they gained and being more customer-centric, which is one of the biggest things that a customer or clients are looking for, is to spend more time with their clients and less time behind the computer.
Amazing. And when you're going into this process with them, or if you want to give another example too, that's fine.
Yeah.
What's the group of people that you're trying to get in the room to put this automation into place?
That's a really, really great question. So one of the other examples that I'll bring up, sure, it's a good segue, thank you, is Electrolux. So Electrolux is a large company. It's funny, they're one of the automation pioneers, right? If you think about what Electrolux does for a business, they created washing machines so that we don't have to manually wash our clothes, and vacuum cleaners and refrigerators and all the things that they do. But for them, what we had to help them automate their IT processes. So in order for us to be able to get all the stakeholders in the room, we had to connect business and IT, right? And in order to do so, they were having issues with cloud infrastructure and not being able to scale and solving complex problems. So what we did, we applied a Cloud Pak Watson for AI Ops, and that allowed them to get visibility into all their infrastructure and the resource management and everything like that, so they could apply AI to all of these infrastructure issues that they were dealing with and eliminate, I think they said that it took them 2 to 3 weeks to solve some of these problems, and applying AI to their infrastructure, we're now able to solve that within an hour. And to Ed's point, and I think Christine mentioned it, now we've got 1,000 hours a year back into our lives. What do we do with those hours? How productive can we be? So the business and the IT collaborated with that, and also I think to some extent brought in the data folks, as data is extremely important in order for us to modernize their systems and see a ton of benefit for them.
Knowing that most people in the room who are with us today are working in some form of AI or automation, what are a couple best practices you would give them? What are some great tips you have?
I think the biggest thing is the culture shift that we need to appreciate of what it takes to get this done within a large organization. We saw that with the DevOps revolution, going from a waterfall methodology into an agile methodology. We need to have that continuous delivery, that continuous feedback loop built into the culture of automation, right? And also embracing AI, right? That's been a scary thing for a lot of folks, to really allow AI to start making decisions for our business, right? It takes time to train those models. The machine learning goes on. So we really need to embrace an automation-centric point of view. We also need to empower the folks in our organization to do things with AI and automation, right? If you don't, it's one thing to shift the culture, but you also have to give them the space to do things and to try things and to fail fast and to learn, right? This is something that hasn't changed over time. Like, these are common things that AI and automation is no different. And the last piece of it is to really just use a data-driven approach, right? Understanding, we spend a lot of time, I'm a process junkie by trade. I spend a lot of time analyzing processes and looking at end-to-end workflows. Sometimes we might be wanting to fix something in accounts payable, but really not looking at the entire supply chain, which was really, a big issue over the last few years. So using data to inform the decisions we make about where we automate will help us do better with AI, and training those models and using data as an approach is really, really at the heart of how we get to the next level of intelligent automation.
Fantastic. Everybody join me in thanking Greg Pollack. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
All right, Greg, you're free to go. I'm going to stick with you all a little bit longer. Now we're going to move on to our case study. So I'd love to welcome to the stage Grace Lee. Grace is the Chief Analytics Officer and SVP at Scotiabank. Give Grace a round of applause as she joins me up on the stage. Hi, Grace. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I just told everyone your title, but interpret for us, what does that mean? What do you do today?
So I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for the bank, and as I think about my role, it's kind of split into two things. So it's looking after data and analytics projects. So how do we help each one of the business lines and corporate functions within the bank best use data and analytics to support their businesses? And so that includes a lot of use cases. That includes a lot of automation. But that's one component of the job, and that's what keeps us in business, because if people don't see the benefit from data and analytics, it's very easy for people to get disenchanted and start to lose interest. But the other component is equally important, which is enabling data and analytics across the enterprise. So the transformational aspect of it is really important, and that includes data platforms, that includes data governance and management, making sure that we're keeping up with data ethics, a lot of things that help all of the people within the organization use data and analytics better. And so when I think about the way that we've used data and analytics in the past, there's two ways to think about it. One is it provides insight so that it allows you to make better business decisions, and we've been doing that since the beginning of time. Every organization is a data-driven organization. It's just how good is your data and how easy is it for you to access it. But then the second component is what we're talking about today, which is data and analytics actually operating your business. And that transformation is actually pretty large. It touches everything from people, process, and technology. And so that's those I would see as the two big things that I do with my day.
It sounds like it keeps you pretty busy.
Oh, yeah.
So what are some things, we're taking this as a case study, right? So I want to break down how this all works for you. What are some things in your day-to-day that have to go right for all of those things that you just described to go to plan?
Yeah, so AI and analytics have been around, as I mentioned, a long time. Even AI itself has been around since the 1930s. So it's not a new concept, but we still don't feel it in our day-to-day. We've gone through a variety of AI winters where people funded it, got disenchanted, stopped funding it, and then we started the cycle all over again. And I think many organizations, including my own, have gone through this cycle of let's do it. We acknowledge that it's important, but we haven't gotten it to actually change the way that we live our lives or our customers experience us. The last time you went to the DMV, the last time you went to a bank branch, I'm pretty sure you didn't feel that different. You didn't feel AI in that experience. But AI exists. And so I think when I think about what needs to go right in my day for me to feel like I've done my job is that it has to integrate into business process. We've talked a lot about the partnership between business and IT. The same relationship needs to happen between business, IT, and data and analytics. If they don't feel it, it didn't happen. If it's really, really smart, if the model's great, it's still a brain in a jar, really smart brain in a jar, but it's still contained by that jar itself. So until it's actually hit a process, it's hit technology, it's kind of like it doesn't exist, is what I share with my team. The only thing that has to go right is that it's integrated into business process. If it's a logistic regression or if it's AI, it kind of doesn't matter. No matter how sophisticated it is, it needs to work.
You brought up the banking center example, so I would love to kind of unpack that with you. So as you're working with a banking customer, what are some ways that AI is interacting with them? How are you guys putting it to work for them?
Yeah, excuse me. So I actually think AI is probably one of the biggest thrusts of our customer experience of evolution over time. So Scotiabank is a very international bank. We have over 20 million customers worldwide. And especially when we have large events that actually hit globally, pandemic is one, inflation, recession, that's happening to all 20 or so million of our customers at the same time. And our entire value proposition is around great advice. How are we going to execute on great advice to 20 million customers at exactly the same time, experiencing the same stressful moment, and being able to do so in a way that's even remotely personalized? AI and analytics has to be at the heart of that. We can't get the scale to be able to do really great work for all of our customers, no matter how affluent they are, no matter how important, or no matter how large. This means that we leave no customer behind, which is really important to me. But also it allows us to ensure that we're delivering on our value proposition for everyone.
It's interesting, you're bringing up kind of the same point that the last panel was as well, about using AI to actually allow you to become more personable. And how are you using that? And how are you thinking at Scotiabank about what does it mean to have a competitive differentiator in this space, knowing that other people are going to be adopting automation and AI? Like, where do you think that you get the competitive advantage?
So I mean, competitive advantage is difficult because the space is moving so quickly. But it's not going to happen on technology, because so much of this space is open source. So much of it, all of us are dealing with the same labor challenges, all the same kind of legacy technology issues. So I really think that the benefit and the differentiation comes from the same place it always came from our employees, from our customers, from listening, from human empathy. And that's, I think, the entire thesis behind automation and what's going to be left after we automate the stuff that's not important. It's the competitive differentiation, and that comes in the form of people.
And how are you thinking about that internally as you're using AI within your own company or to communicate with your own employees? How do you think about that differentiation between what's personal and what's automated, and using the best combination of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, we say AI and we typically mean artificial intelligence. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room has heard augmented intelligence or assisted intelligence. And I think, over time, especially as we think about the differentiation, whether it be for our customers or for our employees, it really does have to be things that actually allow the human to be in the loop, for them to engage, to improve, to add to the data, to add to the intelligence that goes into this machine. Very similar to training up humans. We also want the machine to get better and better over time. And that happens through interaction, whether it be machine to machine, human to human, human to machine. There's lots of ways that we can continue to make even the artificial brain smarter by continuing to imbue it with either the genius of a human or the pattern recognition of a machine. So when we think about how we are embedding it into process for our employees, we talked about this before. It's how do you make their lives easier, for sure. But then as I think about the transformation that we're all going through, and again, very, very tight labor markets and a lot of turnover, how do we actually get to a point where that's no longer as structural a constraint as it currently is? So how do we we have lots of folks who speak to our customers, whether they be in branches or in contact centers. They turn over at an alarming pace. And the ability to get to a differential customer experience, time to proficiency is at least 9 months, if not longer, given current methods. If we can use automation, if we can make it so that they're focusing on those parts of the job that are actually differential, if we can give them coaching in the moment, if we can do any of the things that automation, AI, et cetera, allow us to do, suddenly that 9 months turns into 6, turns into 3, and we have a fundamentally different curve for labor, just as an organization, forgetting about, of course, the employee experience of not having to manage 100 different products on the shelf, having to understand all of the policies and procedures behind each one of them. It's a really hard job, and if we can make it easier, and if this is the way to do it, I'm happy to help.
Do you think that that's going to be helpful also just in retaining talent and getting people to stay around longer?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I've met with some of our frontline staff, whether they be in the contact centers or the branches. I've spoken to employees even in head office that really struggle, with the workload and the complexity that we keep adding with regulations, with new experiences, with new products, with new services. And as we get more and more digital, we spend a lot of time in front of the glass because we've been so customer focused, which is great, but we always forget the behind the glass component of it. So the hamster wheels that have to go on to ensure that the customer experience is excellent means that our employees, they take on most of the burden, whether it be in our processing centers or in our front line. I can imagine the level of stress that they've been under, having to do that remotely, impossible, and yet they've done it. But I think people are getting weary, understandably. So again, if we can help to make their lives easier, if we can help to understand how complex we're making their jobs, and then do the hard work to automate it and to fix the process or fix the operating model so that it accommodates these things, a bit more effectively. Again, I think it's nothing but upside from an employee experience perspective and ultimately for the performance of our businesses.
Another thing another thing we've done a bunch of reporting on is as employees are deciding whether they want to stay with companies and how they're feeling about them, they're thinking a lot more about the sustainability efforts, or they're thinking about the D&I policies of the organization. So are there any ways you all are thinking about using AI or automation to help with, D&I, for example, and how are you bringing that to life?
Yeah, certainly. I think, look, there's so much bias in our experience over the last couple of decades. I think we've all lived that. And analytics and data is in the business of looking at our history and predicting our future. So I think, as I think about our data ethics program, or I think about some of the things that we've been doing to embed a little bit more objectivity into some of these decisions, we also have to think about how biased the data itself is. So, one of the things that we do is, or one of the ways that most organizations think about combating this is making sure that you have a workforce that represents the customer base that you serve, which is very, very diverse. We're in many different countries, 6 predominantly, and all of them represent entirely different experiences, different customer bases, different cultures, different skill bases, different technology contexts. And by having them well represented within our teams, all kinds of diversity, whether it be visible diversity or experiential diversity or skill diversity, all of that is very important to ensuring that when we are building these systems or when we are building out processes or when we're thinking about our customer or our employee, we have a range of folks around the table that are providing their opinion and debating, hopefully debating. If you're not debating, then there's no real diversity in the room. But I think that's actually helped us to think about our processes differently, and whether it's in embedding AI into our HR processes or embedding AI into the way that we support our customers. We can do all of those things, but without having the right workforce to question the way that we're applying it. The D&I efforts or the sustainability efforts or whatever agenda we're trying to ensure makes it into our work doesn't really happen.
We have a question from the audience I'd like to take. If deep learning and other technologies further progress, will emotional experiences also be automated? If so, how long do you think this will take? What do you think, Grace?
Well, you know what? I think just as with everything else that we talked about today, components of it can be. And so certainly when we think about some of the AI capabilities that are resident in the contact center now, you can actually automate, hey, what is the sentiment that this customer is coming in with? And you might get it right some of the time. You'll probably get it wrong most of the time. But acting on that kind of signal still is very human. And I know that there are lots of different ways that we'll continue to progress on deep learning and making more and more real kind of human experiences, robots, et cetera. But I think, for me personally, the only true emotion I felt at a bot is anger. And then the rest, if it's a great experience, I know it's been automated in some way, and it doesn't feel as special. So I think, emotional connection is it's very rare, it's very nuanced. I think we're a long way from that.
Yeah, and very cultural, I think, as you mentioned that too. If you're working in different countries, you're dealing with a whole different set of cultures and emotions and experiences that you want to layer onto that as well, which I can only imagine is harder to do in an automated way. Yeah. I hate to bring up COVID one more time, but I feel like I have to because I do think it changed a lot of the way that people were interacting with their banks as well, both companies but also just consumers. So how are you thinking about automation in this kind of post-COVID, not that COVID's over, but in following those big changes that we've experienced over the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, COVID for all of its disruption was really a great catalyst for change. I think it's very easy for us to say later on things that are difficult. Sending your entire workforce home, we never would have thought about doing that. And now, just imagine, one, that we survived that, and two, it's allowed for a completely different employee experience. So the customer experience, the digitization we've talked about, I'm sure, ad nauseum, but I'd really love to shine a spotlight on what it's meant for parents, what it's meant for our employees, what it's meant for people who have, elderly parents who are struggling. I certainly had my own experience during COVID. If I hadn't been able to work remotely, it would have been it was already a painful experience. It would have been much more painful. So I think giving people flexibility and giving people agency over their lives and their careers in a different way is one of the best legacies of COVID. But certainly, we would not have been forced to do that for our employees, our customers, our businesses, had we not had that catalyst. But maybe the next time we need a big transformation, we shouldn't have a pandemic. We can try a different way.
I agree. I think that's a good call, Grace. What are some examples of ways that you all at Scotiabank have changed as a result of these years of working remotely and the pressures of the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think in all of those same ways, I'm sure all of your organizations have changed. So, we've digitized a lot more. We've gotten a lot more ruthless about the prioritization of what we focus on. And a lot of what we do now is much more at scale. You can't just say, okay, well, we're going to send a list to the branch and they're just going to go through and tick all of these calls. You actually have to make it a lot more systemic when everybody is digital, when the customer is digital, and when the employee is digital. So there's a lot more that we've done to actually invest in our infrastructure to ensure that we're ready for whatever the next big disruption is going to be. Certainly in the way that we interact with our customers, there's a lot more that's happening in all of our channels. We are still very much committed to our branch network, and we actually were one of the few banks that kept our branch network open during the pandemic. However, we recognize that there's the multi-channel, omni-channel, whatever we call it these days, is still very much a part of the way that customers want to interact with us. So we've been a lot more thoughtful about what that journey is and can be, and certainly customers have changed alongside organizations to make that much more possible. And then, as I mentioned before, we're still hybrid, and we're still allowing our employees that level of flexibility to work where and how they'd like. We're mindful about what makes a lot more sense to be done in person, and certainly we've given teams the choice to do so, and they've taken us up on it. But it does make working for the bank in a time that's still very much in flux, I think a much more positive one. So again, all of these legacies I think will be sustained and hopefully very helpful going forward.
And how are you thinking about how automation helps the bank scale?
Automation is scale at the end of the day. So I think as much as we can possibly do to automate as much of the process that, again, is either broken or is fixed but is still manual, I think is very important. One of the things that is probably standing in our way is, again, if I look at the two ways that data and analytics has been applied or can be applied, data doesn't have to be perfect, data doesn't have to be fast. When it's made for strategic decision making, you can apply the Pareto principle. You can deal with a little bit of difficulty in accessing that data and friction. When you automate, it needs to be perfect, it needs to be fast, and you need to feel very comfortable that the decisions that are being made now, when before it might be 10 decisions, it's 1,000 decisions that are following this rule. You got to feel really comfortable about that. So I think that's enabled us to really look at the process, really look at the ethical consequences of the decisions that we're making around data, and ensuring that we feel really, really, really good about that decision. And then automation from there, once you've liberated the data, once you have it on the right platforms, it becomes a lot easier to do. But that wholesale automation across the entire organization, as you guys would all know, is very difficult. So choosing the right use cases, which I heard before, making sure that you feel very, very comfortable around the decision, liberating the data, and then putting it into operations. That's created a ton of scale for us. And one of the best examples of that is our footprint's very wide. We have a global data and AI platform. And that means that a modeler in Canada or a modeler in Bogota or a modeler in Chile can equally add to this library of different models that we have for our customer base. So it's not strictly speaking automation, but our ability to scale is enabled through technology.
You mentioned ethics, and so I want to hear more about how are you taking pains and thinking about using AI in an ethical way?
I'm very proud of our data ethics team, and we have a dedicated data ethics team that reports directly to me. A lot of what we've been hearing around the space, and I know everybody understands how important it is how do we ensure that we are not, if our business is transformation, we should not be in the business of perpetuating biases that exist in our data. So we should be asking the right questions. We should be thinking about, how are we using this data? What are we using it for? Not only is our modeling process right, but how are we thinking about data from a usage perspective? I know a lot of people are thinking about monetizing data. There's open banking that's coming our way. So there's lots of ethical considerations that need to be taken into account. The reason why I'm so proud of our team is because we publish standards for sure, and I know that many have, but operationalizing data ethics is impossible because you actually have to sit in front of every model. You have to sit in front of every decision around data and ask those questions, and our team has actually operationalized it. I think it comes down to the structure of the team within the bank where data, analytics, and technology all sit together. So we have the makers and the consumers in the same team, so we can actually force the issue for people to actually put into their modeling process. Are we doing the right thing? We have a governance process around it. We have a tool that is AI-based to ask some of those questions of the models as they're being built. So to me, walking the talk on this has been a labor of love, but something that I think is really important for us all to do.
Fantastic. Grace, thank you so much for joining me for this case study.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome to the stage my colleague, Deirdre Depke. She is the Senior Programming Director for Bloomberg Live. Deirdre, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi, good morning, everybody. I'd like you to meet our next panel. We have some great people coming on up. Joining me is Mohit Bhatt. He is Vice President of Customer Solutions and Innovation at Canadian National Railway. We also have Michael Chung, who is Vice President, Data Transformation and Automation at CI Global Asset Management, and Samit Parab, Head of Product Industry Platforms at Amdocs. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Samit, I'll start with you.
Sure.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about Amdocs and what your role is at the company?
Sure. Amdocs is a 40-year-old company, really focused on, it's a software and service provider, providing services to leading communications and media companies. A couple of things that we do is we help cloud transformation. Companies transform into the cloud. We differentiate with 5G, and we make sure we automate and digitalize their processes overall to empower our customers to give next generation experiences for their end users. Customers include the likes of AT&T, T-Mobile, Comcast, Rogers, and Bell. Specifically in my role, I had product for industry platforms. Basically, I'm responsible for the innovation and the strategy around various SaaS products in the portfolio. And the main thing is ensuring that we're product-led and ensuring that we provide impact overall for the products that we have.
Great. Mohit, CNR is a 103-year-old company, so you've done a lot of transformation in over 103 years. You've got 20,000 railroaders who are transporting $250 billion worth of goods in North America. That's a lot of complexity. How do you manage that process?
Well, just to add to that, CN truly is an enabler of North American economy. If you eat it, if you wear it, if you drive it, chances are we deliver it. So CN truly is a network of network business. And when it comes to complexity of handling a network of network business, you ought to make sure all the touch points are well taken care of. So the first thing that we have looked at from an automation standpoint is we have defined an automation agenda which is business-led, technology-enabled. We have worked with our business units and defined an automation journey from a small A automation, which is a process automation, a data mining automation, a robotic process automation. So going from a small A to a big A for us, and a big A automation stands for a cognitive automation where you bring in the power of technology using AI, using machine learning, and going beyond machine learning and AI also to a quantum computing world. So our journey has been to define those small A to a big A journey and a gap plan for all of our business units and pick the items that have the maximum ROI, maximum value, which is going back to our business, and define that journey for all of our operating units and business units. To give you a few examples on that, we have automated a lot of end-to-end supply chain processes when it comes to how we deal with ports, how we deal with our partners, how we deal with our trucking communities. We have overall in our network 23 plus terminals and multiple yards where we either deal with containers or rail cars. We have automated our in-gate, out-gate processes so that we make ease of business for our truckers and partners. We have automated a lot of customer processes using APIs so that we enable near real-time to real-time tracking of our goods and shipments on our platform. And we have automated a lot of rolling stock as well as our linear assets as well. So we have 20,000 plus miles of our network. So imagine that network in the conditions of Canada. Our network goes from East Coast to the West Coast, going down to the Gulf of Mexico. So we have to deal with weather conditions, weather patterns, ice, snow, you name it. So we have automated a lot of defect management processes, predictive maintenance processes, and we have two massive programs. One is automated inspection portal that identifies defects while the train is in motion. So think of large-scale machine vision programs that really identify defects while the train is in motion at the track speed. We have another automation program to identify defects on our tracks, which is called Automated Track Inspection Portal, which is literally a moving data center connected to a revenue train. And we have a number of those rail cars. I call them as connected data centers coming from a tech field. They identify all the geometric defects, rail ties defect, anything that is going onto the rail tracks. We use LiDAR, sonar, AI, you name it, a complex automation technology to identify those defects, to make our track workers safer, to make our ecosystem safer, and to give a value-added service to our customers.
Your challenge is a complex one, and you've met it with a complex solution. Martin, very nice to see you. CI Global Asset Management is not a young company. You're 60 years in business, and I imagine there was a lot of evolution that happened there. But you've spent the past 2 years sort of investing heavily in a digital transformation. What does that look like?
So our strategy was around building in some operational efficiencies and cost savings. Our ultimate goal there was an increased or an enhanced client experience, but as well as an employee experience. The strategy we used was to start with systematic sprints across 4 work streams. There was so many levers that we could have pulled to gain some efficiencies, but we couldn't boil the ocean, or we didn't want to boil the ocean, and we wanted to manage the disruption across our existing business. So what we did was, we did systematic sprints across 4 work streams, 2 in our operations, 1 in IT, and 1 in our contact center.
And the underlying technology for the transformation?
So specifically with intelligent automation, we're using a robotic process automation platform as well as an intelligent document processing platform.
Interesting. Mohit, or Sumit, Amdocs has a no-code, low-code product that you're pushing out to customers. I assume that means it's for the less technological buyer that sort of reassures them. Is that the idea there?
I think the main thing to look at when you look at no-code, low-code is exactly the barrier of actually being able to execute faster, right? Being able to execute at scale. And so the products we support allow for that, allow for you to go with, I would say a workforce that isn't necessarily that you can find at a broader scale. To really push that execution side of it, right? Really, even internally for ourselves, what we want to look at is you have the ability to execute quickly and really focus on what's the impact and the insights you get out of it. So really, that's what we really want to drive with our low-code and no-code products.
You use it internally too.
Yeah, for sure. Internally for us, it does help, especially when it comes to scalability. The teams that we're a part of are naturally small, being a department that's in its growth stage. So really, what we want to do is make sure that we can provide the most impact, ensure that we can do the most out of the resources that we have. So definitely comes in handy, especially when it comes to experimenting and getting things out in the market quicker to see how we can be flexible and agile with what we do.
It improves communication, breaks down silos. Is that the idea?
Yes, it does. I think in a sense that you get more time to focus outside of just the core execution. Your head is not really focused in terms of building something to hit a deadline. It does actually accelerate that timeline and gives you time to focus on other things. Like mentioned earlier, saving that 1 hour allows for the communication across different silos and different departments.
Mohit, you described a very complex transformation, as we said. How does the workforce react to that? What's the cultural challenge in getting everybody on board, literally, figuratively, on the train?
I think for every transformation, there are 3 key elements, and I guess it was discussed in previous panels as well. So we have to get the act of people, process, and technology together. And what we believe, technology, you have different variations of technology coming in. You will have a lot of technical expertise coming in from your partners, from your workforce. So I would say it's a thread which is still under control. Process, we have used multiple frameworks for process optimization, be it Lean, Six Sigma, and whatnot. So it's another thread which I would say is still manageable and under control. Where we have spent majority of the effort is on the people aspect. We are a 103-year-old company, so we have a lot of systems where we depend on tribal knowledge. We have a lot of systems where we don't have an up-to-date documentation available. It goes back to 30, 35 years old technologies and systems we have used. So what we have focused on truly is to bring people together with us on that journey and spend a lot of effort in explaining the context, sharing the why, explaining how, and bringing everyone's skill set to the level that they can be part of the journey. And I would say that's where we have spent majority of the effort. It's taking time, but it's the right thing to do, because then you have a flywheel innovation that comes out of it when the whole workforce is fully embracing the change and embracing the technology and the process optimization work that is happening in our ecosystem.
This is probably a good question for you from our audience. How do you view capacity saved as a benefit to automation?
So for us, if you look at it, as I mentioned, truly supply chain is a network of network business. And for us to deliver goods, to deliver cars, to deliver everything that we use in our day-to-day operations, we have to depend on multiple touch points. So to just give you a real use case, goods that come from either Asia or come from Europe, they go through the customs and they go through trucking companies first to get to them to the port. Then you work with steamship liners. Steamship liners, when a ship arrives at the port in North American context, they work with local workforce to de-ramp the containers. Then we work with either CBSA or United States Customs Security to get the goods cleared, and then they work with our workers to get stuff onto the trains. So if you look at multiple touch points, for us the capacity is bringing automation to bring the productivity aspect. So we could ship goods faster, we could deliver goods faster to our customers, and at the same time bring a level of employee experience through automating all those multiple touch points. That's where we have spent a lot of effort. For us, it's the productivity gain that comes into play. It's not just a cost-saving play. Cost-saving comes as a byproduct. For us, the majority of the effort has been to bring productivity to our overall end-to-end supply chain and make it as seamless as possible, as data-driven as possible, and bring it consistent and bring a lot of resilience into supply chain. And we all have seen what happened in COVID. Supply chain disruptions are still happening. So our job has been use technology to make supply chain more resilient and bring as less friction points through technology and data integration is where we have been focused on as a team.
I want to get back to supply chain in a little while, but Martin, I wanted to hear sort of the labor question for you too, the workforce question. You're in the middle of this transformation. That means your people have to be engaged and basically buy into it. How do you achieve that culturally?
Yeah, and I think the simple answer is change management. This is a key aspect to any transformation. I think transformations can easily be measured against the amount of effort you're putting into change management, whether you succeed or you fail. The key is to, as you mentioned, is to bring people along for the journey. If you don't bring them along for the journey, you will not have that adoption that you so seek at the end of it. And I think the critical aspect is people. You can't really automate without the people and the expertise that they have that are doing the manual processes. And what you're doing is you're not necessarily automating them out of work. What you're doing is you're automating them into higher value work. You're dealing with the menial tasks, the work that really consumes them for hours and hours on end. on a daily basis, and you're giving them that time back so that they can actually focus on the things that require their decision-making power and their knowledge and their industry experience.
I think when the process of automation became sort of widespread and understood by the workforce in general, people really had that fear that, well, this means my job is going away.
It's change, right? So
Right.
there's always anxiety around change. And as long as you attempt to, it's not always going to work, but you attempt to manage it, I think you can build that level of trust with the entire organization.
Right. Sumit, same question for you. Workforce culture, how do you go about altering that?
Well, I'd say, like you mentioned, like was mentioned before, you really want to bring them along with the journey, right? You got to make them a part of it. It really is kind of understanding, you're upskilling. You're not necessarily being replaced, right?
Right.
You're saving the time of something that's medial to really focus on the things in terms of how do you improve the process. Really giving that element of inclusion to say that, hey, this is a process. It's going to continuously change, and for the better, to be more efficient, to get the best out of your time. So using that and using that type of kind of methodology with the employees really does help to kind of bring them along and sees that, hey, they're spending their time on stuff that's meaningful as opposed to something that's not.
Does that help you with recruitment and retention, particularly in this labor market?
I think retention, it's always, people love working on things that are exciting, right? And so, really taking away from the medial task really focuses on that. When it comes to recruiting, the same thing applies. We really want to understand the person, really the value and the impact they're going to bring, and not necessarily what they're going to be able to do quickly, right? Treat them as a person and not a resource.
Right. Well, why don't you tell us where we are in that supply chain? I think everybody wants to know. Is the problem solved? Are we halfway there? Are we...
I think it's a journey, and where we stand right now, we have been looking multiple touch points and see how we truly define an end-to-end supply chain platforms. We have been investing in automating multiple parts of that touch point. So if you look at what we have done in the last 2+ years, we have a digital twin of our network. We call it a smart network. It has so many what-if scenarios available for us, so we could truly look at where do we need to deploy our capacity or where do we need to deploy our crews so that we can solve the problem in the supply chain ecosystem in our network. That's one. We have, I talked about automated inspection portals where we have a revenue train going through the portal and we identify defects. So identifying defects allows us to turn the train faster for the next move, which allows us to bring a lot more resilience to supply chain. Similarly, we have automated track inspection portal, which allow us to, it's again a moving data center connected to a revenue train that identifies defects for us. We have been able to improve the defect detection by almost 10x times. Now, what has that allowed us to do is again run trains in a much more resilient way, so bring a lot more resilience. We have been working with our customer service teams to have a lot more automation brought into our customer service ecosystem so that we can have a value-added discussion with our customers rather than doing customer service job just to solve the problems. And overall, what we are focusing on now is we are truly bringing a supply chain platform on our ecosystem where we have customers, partners, employees, customer service teams all connected to one source of truth, so you can have an end-to-end orchestration done right from your order to cash process. As soon as you get an order, how you work and deal with that order with your operating systems, operating teams, and then orchestrate that back, the data back into your core platform and have that seamless information shared with everybody else as well. So it's a journey. We are on that journey. We are not done, and it's going to be an ongoing track until we really go to the stage where we have seamless interfaces and seamless interactions done with all the multiple touch points, be it customers that deal with us, be it intermediary parties that work with us, be it ports, government officials, customs bodies, and whatnot. So that's where we are, and everybody is focused on making sure that we have seamless interconnections or automation developed from a technology standpoint for our business so that they can have customer service as well as resiliency baked into the overall supply chain process.
Well, we're rooting for you. In particular, I need a new car, so. Martin, you serve 1 million customers every day. What's the technology that most transformed that relationship between CIS and the customer?
So, I mean, it's kind of a huge ecosystem of technology within our our company. But our business is still very much a people and a relationship type of business. So technology isn't going to replace that part. What we do with our technology is to enable whether our sales, our service, or our back office IT to be able to create, build, automate things faster, deliver them faster. One of the key aspects of that, though, is the accuracy and the error reduction in what you're doing. So inherently, when people are processing things, errors, human error can happen a lot, and that has a negative effect on your client experience. With automation and with technology, you can virtually eliminate a lot of those errors because the bots are really they're processing in the exact same way. The key there is the input. So it's garbage in, garbage out. But if it's good, whatever your inputs are good coming in, then it's going to be perfect coming out.
Smeet, is there a single most pressing technology issue for your clients, or do you get the same question over and over?
Yeah, I think for our customers overall of Amdocs, I think the main thing that we're looking at is the transformation into the cloud, right? Really, that's been the focus, and along with that, making sure that the transformation for them, along with the automated processes and the digitalization, makes sense and provides impact. So that's really been the focus for our customers. Along with that, we want to make sure that the rest of the next-gen technologies are there for them, making sure that they have the ability to access the low-code, no-code side of things, along with the process to enable that for them. So really, that's where our focus is right now, and building with them as they go into this journey.
How big a concern is security for those customers?
Security is big. I think especially with the companies we're dealing with, data breach is going to be very important for us. So a lot of focus has been put in terms of ensuring that there's a security as we work with the various principal cloud providers that are out there, ensuring there's a level of security that's there, because there's a lot of important information, especially when it comes to the billing information of our users, personal information, that it stays protected.
We have a question from the audience, and Grace mentioned this too. I was very interested. With data ethics, there's been a trend where businesses are questioning the security and the ethics of the use of their data. Is that something you run into, and how do you?
Yeah, for sure. I think this focusing on the ethics and use of the data. I think the main thing is transparency. Some of the things that we've seen around GDPR and CCPA, making sure that the individual knows exactly how the data is being used and has control of the data that is being used, right? You're seeing that a lot when this comes to the basic things such as cookies, right? Expanding that to the other, definitely with AI, there's definitely many data points. Letting them know how that data is being used and making sure that they have the ability to control that is going to be important.
Same question for you, Martin. I imagine this is a concern of your clients.
It is, and I'll be honest, I'm not really qualified to answer the question. However, I think governance around data is super important, and I think the fact that we have chief security officers now, which wasn't sort of a role that existed maybe 5 years ago, I think that just leads into how important this is. And yeah, I think definitely as much as effort and resources you're putting into collecting that data, I think you should probably be devoting as much to securing it.
I'm afraid we're out of time. It was a great pleasure having you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to welcome Lauren back to the stage. And thanks, gentlemen. Thank you, Martin.
Well, that's it. Thank you all so much for being with us today. It's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you to all of our speakers and moderators. Let's just give them one more round of applause. Really, really interesting stuff from everyone. I want to give a huge thank you again to IBM. Thank you guys so much for supporting these conversations. If you want to learn any more about the work that they're doing, check out the resources tab in the event website. There's more details for you there. If you want to see any of the replays from these events, see any of our conversations again, they'll be posted on the Bloomberg Live website, so check that out. You can see these conversations another time, share it with somebody else. Thank you all again so much for being here. Please join us just right through these doors. We'd love to do some networking with you afterwards. Thank you again.